Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast. I am here with a definite 100% not safe for work podcast episode. We're going to be interviewing my new friend, Ty Rivera, who was introduced to me by Mike Eaton, a comedian out in Austin, Texas. Shout out to Mike. We need to get you out here to have you on the show. And Ty is a gay, Hispanic, professional comedian, has a new YouTube channel up here in Vegas, and has been attempted to be canceled by your own community several times. So let's go there first. I guessed when you walked in, I said, I suspect maybe you're gay. You said, yeah, maybe a little bit. And then you made a joke about your girlish arms. And then apparently you said, yeah, it's unfortunate because my own community, they should leave me alone. I'm Hispanic, gay, all those people should be leaving me alone. And they've tried to cancel you multiple times. So do you want to start there and then we can go to your background?
Yeah, no, I'm fine starting wherever. And yeah, there with woke culture, which I've never subscribed to, there was never a point where I had to get disillusioned with that. I mean, from the beginning, I was just like, yeah, this is bullshit, it was too many rules. And coming up when I came up, because I started doing stand-up in 2003. And
damn.
So...
Veteran.
Yeah, well, and when you're starting in 2003, people didn't have the politically correct filter that they have now. So you just had to work through everything. And so I got past a lot of the stuff that people really concern themselves with now. And I built up a thick skin to it. And I also realized that a lot of the people that, because of their words, it would be assumed that they would hate me, were actually really cool. And the people that were the most politically correct were usually the most standoffish once they got off stage. And now the way it works is it's very similar in the way that the woke crowd will say all of the right things, but then when it comes to actually listening to a person like me or having to get past just whatever their triggers are, suddenly then they'll try to shut me down. And it's like, well, aren't I the kind of person that you're always saying you want to listen to and you want to hear from and more representation and a seat at the table and all that bullshit? And so when it comes to me and gay, because before we came on, we talked a little bit about the B and the T and on, you know what I mean? Transgender.
LBGT plus, and I made the comment because I've heard this from many of my gay friends. They're like, hey man, the T's and beyond are kind of messing up the progress that the LBG section made. And I get it. It's a spectrum. I just want everybody to be whoever the fuck they want to be. But from the outside looking in, who I grew up with my dad and his best friend introducing each other as gay lovers because they could care less.
Yeah.
My favorite uncle gay, I could care less. I grew up in LA. It was just part of culture. But from the outside looking in, it feels like the pushing of the T and the drag queens dancing for children and some weird shit that's going on societally, which I understand society is always pushing the boundaries. I feel like it's kind of fucking it up for the L's and the B's and the G's.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing, I've hung out with trans people my entire life, my entire adult life. I've hung out with trans people, and they were never sensitive like the new school trans people. So I don't even know, well, that's a lie. Around 2014, 2015 is when I started really noticing the hard push from the militant transgenders that were never pretty enough to and I think
your words, not mine. I can't get fired.
Yeah, it's that. This is all me. Blame it on the gay one.
Perfect. You're taking the bullets for me, bro.
Yeah, but that's really what it is. It's a bunch of people that don't look like what they claim to be. You claim to be a woman, but you don't look like a woman, and you're mad because society just doesn't know you're a woman right off the bat. Well, that's not everybody else's problem. They didn't purposely misgender you. They weren't trying to disrespect you. It was an accident, and now you're in your feelings trying to make the lady at Victoria's Secret lose her job because she didn't realize that you were a woman. And it sounds like I'm joking when I say stuff like this, but in a lot of cases, that's what I've noticed it really is. It's people that don't look like what they identify as. And if you tell me, and then I choose to still misgender you, then that I understand as being disrespect. Yeah. But if I have no idea and it's an honest mistake, and then you won't shut up about it, and then at a point I just tell you, well, work harder,
Work harder. Yeah. Oh, fuck.
I told one person that literally.
You're lucky you don't have more black eyes, man.
Yeah, well,
So when we say like certain crowds have tried to cancel you in comedy, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't get a gig, or they report you to Twitter and Instagram to try to get you deplatformed, or they boo you? Like, what does cancel mean? Because I think a lot of Republicans use this as the boogeyman, is like, oh, we're in cancel culture. If you're a Republican or you believe in free speech or you believe in God, like they're going to try to cancel you. It's like, all right, well, what does that even really mean? So like when that happens to you, like a mob or a group of people come after you, is it in person, online, in the comedic scene? Like, what does that mean? Like, where is that
me,
manifested?
it's kind of all of it, you
Okay.
know, because I do have a social media presence, so they will try to come after me there. And then they'll also start getting in contact with the clubs that I'm supposed to be performing at. If they don't get the response that they want from, why is somebody bugging me? Scam likely. Of course it is. That's all that calls me is scammers.
You and me both.
It's probably a friend or an ex. My phone knows. But they'll really, like, you know, and if they don't get the result they want from just telling the actual story, sometimes they'll make stories up for the clubs and try to say that, like, there was one time where I don't know who exactly was doing it, but it was after one of these situations where they were sending to the clubs that I make trouble at the clubs and I'll give the waitresses a hard time, and like, you know, that I'm just basically a nightmare at the clubs. And
Yeah, you look like a real sexist asshole.
yeah, and
give me a break.
and then also like what's it called? That I'll write Yelp reviews, and it's like I've been doing stand up for 19 years. And at this time, you know, at the time that this was happening, it was probably 4 years ago, so 15 years. If that was what I was doing, the club owners would have heard about it from other club owners. They wouldn't have to hear about it from some random just sending a, you know, an anonymous email. And so it was very unsuccessful in that way. But as far as scaring certain organizations, like I've had times where they have scared some people off, at least to a certain degree. There was a point where I was supposed to do a lot of gay pride events, and then those got canceled, which I was fine with, because the gay pride events, a lot of times they want you, just because you're gay, to like work super cheap or free. And it's kind of like, well, you're paying some, you know, has-been from the 80s or 90s, like 20 grand, 30 grand to headline your pride festival, but you can't find 1,000 for me. Like, for me, I've got to do it either free or for like $100. Like,
Yeah.
Why would I want to do that? So, like, you know, and in the beginning, it was like I would say stuff to that because I wanted to help the community. I wanted to, you know, have a presence in the community. But once I realized that was bullshit, then I started caring about that a lot less, where it was just sort of like, yeah, you guys are just kind of, you know, cheap.
So what I don't understand for you and other people that are in your situation, especially in comedy, it's like, all right, so I coach financial professionals. I work for a big corporation and I do home loans where we have to equally represent everybody because that's like federal law. My friends that are lawyers that have a certain, you know, decorum to uphold because they have to go into court. All right, let's be honest. I can't have that job if I look like you and I got the piercings and I'm saying inappropriate shit. But you've chosen this path of being a fucking comedian. Who is the person that says, you know what, I'm going to try to cancel this person from society or their ability to make a living or to go work at a club for comedy? It's not like you're a loan officer or you're a lawyer or you're a corrections officer or something where there's a certain, you know, public persona that needs to be met. You are a professional comedian. Like, who are these D-bags that are trying to get comedians canceled?
Ironically enough, in a lot of cases, it's other comedians.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it just recently started to change where more comedians, because it's usually not working comedians. I've never seen a working comedian do it. It's
And
usually
define that for people that don't understand working comedian. Like, they're not on the scene. Like, what does a working comedian mean?
a working comedian is just somebody that's actually making a living or at least making money. Sometimes, you know, because comedy, the trajectory of comedy when it comes to like actually making money in comedy is you start off where you make no money, and then you get to a point where you will maybe break even if you're lucky. Sometimes you go in the hole a little bit when you first start going on the road. And then you get to the point where you make a little bit of money, and then eventually you get to the point where you make enough to sustain yourself.
Yeah. So
You know.
maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, because I understand the open mic scene. I'm just trying to become a comedian. I'll drive from club to club to club to hopefully get my name pulled out of a hat to get 2 or 3 minutes up on stage for practice. And maybe I even have to bring 5 people in the door with me so I can get a free beer. That's like the open mic. And then there's Dave Chappelle, who signs a $100 million contract with Netflix for 5 specials. I don't understand the economics in between. Is it like, hey, there's a whole bunch of comedians that are getting by on 10 grand a year or 50 grand a year? Like what happens between, all right, I'm doing open mic to see if I can be a comedian and I sign the Netflix special? Like, I don't understand the touring or the economics, or I don't understand how the shit in the middle works.
That's the whole spectrum. Like what you're saying, like some comics are out there making 10 grand a year, some are making 60 grand a year, some are making 100, you know, and it does have a lot to do with your hustle. Yeah, once you get past a certain point, obviously, when you're an open micer, you have very little control. You know, you can't do anything.
You're just begging for a couple minutes on stage to work on your craft.
Yeah, and that's why social media is such a big thing. Because with social media, there's a lot of people that are famous on social media and aren't mainstream famous, aren't obviously like a Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, that are making a shitload of money.
Really? And how are they doing it online? Like they're selling T-shirts or?
Well, with YouTube, you can make really good money once, you know, your YouTube, not only off the AdSense, but also off sponsorship. So YouTube can be a good place to make money. Then there's also Patreon. Then there's also, you can do like one night gigs at clubs and make really good money off of a door deal. Because
how does that work? Give me like the economics of a comedian door deal. So you've got a good Instagram following. You can get 100 people, 200 people out to a comedy club in Las Vegas. Like what does a door deal look like for kind of your up and coming comedian?
Well, for like a newer comedian, like a standard door deal is usually like what's called a guarantee versus deal. So in a guarantee versus deal, usually the club will guarantee you $500 to $600, however it goes. You know, if you're at least, you know, like they feel like somebody's going to show up,
right?
You know, and so they'll guarantee you $500 to $600, and then that's versus 60% of the door over whatever their club costs are. So a lot of times that's over $1,000 or $1,500. So once you are over $1,000 or $1,500 in ticket sales, then you get 60%. Depending on what's more, you know, the 500 you were going to get, or
so what's a comedy club here in Las Vegas that seats, you know, 80 to 100 people? Is there one you can think of off the top of your head?
Let's see. Well, LA Comedy Club just got bigger. It was like 100 people, 120, I think.
Cool. So you know the guy, the booking, whoever does the booking at LA Comedy Club, and you're like, hey man, between Instagram and my local, you know, kind of network and what, I can get 100 people for $20-$30 a head. Once they make their operation cost to have the bartender and the doorman and stuff, you know, maybe they pay you $500 to show up and you get some small percentage of the door after they cover their expenses, and then they make a bunch of money on booze and kind of everybody goes home happy.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, because you don't get any part of that. You know, like the alcohol or the food. Right.
Which is where these comedy clubs have to make their money, right? Because it's like, I order a Coors Light and it's $17 or something.
Yeah, but, you know, not according to them.
Yeah. Look, any business that's been open, like I used to live 3 blocks from the Ice House in Pasadena.
Oh, yeah.
And they would always say they were broke and they were struggling and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, any business that's been open for 37 years is making money. Give me a fucking break. You're not running a charity here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, you know, I've gotten in trouble over things like that I said on social media, though, just not too long ago. But also, like, the flip side to that is a lot of club owners will hit me up and send me LOLs in private because I'll talk about comedy club owners trying to talk to me about the content, you know?
Right.
And I do really well. So if people were walking out, I can understand you talking to me about content. But when you're talking about your personal taste, I don't care about your personal taste at all as a comedy club owner. You know, I just don't. If you're like, you know, I don't appreciate when you say, I don't really care.
Wait, people are walking out of comedy clubs? That's a real thing?
No, not during my shows, but yeah, like there are comics that are bad enough that people will just walk out.
If they're bad. Okay, yeah. I get that. I thought you meant like they're offended or something because...
Well, yeah, because, you know, what I do is technically, quote unquote, offensive. But people just really like it, so they don't see it that way.
Right.
You know, but like that's where I'll sometimes run into trouble with clubs because a lot of times when you're working the road, unless you have it in your contract or you state that you want to bring your own person, a lot of times the clubs will just pair you up with like a feature and an opener.
Got it.
So the two people that go up before you will be just randoms from local, like local randoms. And so a lot of times with me, the clubs will be like, all right, well, we'll put our dirtiest opener and our dirtiest feature with him because we know that he's dirty and he'll be able to follow it.
Right.
But then that will bother me a lot of times because I'm like, you don't get it. Like, I'm good at what I do. And the fact that I'm dirty or whatever is just because that's naturally what I'm like. That's
Right.
the way I talk. I'm not trying to shock these people.
Right.
So now you have these two new comics in front of me that are doing that, just trying to shock people, and people are leaving and people are mad, and then I have to dig out of the hole because the people you picked weren't good picks, or weren't really good comics in a lot of cases.
Right.
So that's where we get to where I've had arguments with club owners, and I don't mind at this point. I don't care even a little bit at this point when club owners get mad at me because I'll tell them what it is I want or what I think, makes a show actually good. And so I posted on Facebook not too long ago, you let me worry about the comedy, and I'll let you worry about the price of chicken strips.
How'd that go over?
Well, a lot of people laugh, but then, some people get mad publicly. But
Right.
the ones that because I posted that not too long ago too, I was like, don't jump on my Facebook trying to, if you're a club owner or a booker, don't jump on my Facebook trying to change my opinion or thinking you're going to change my opinion because you chimed in.
Right.
I know what all of you pay. None of you pay enough to make me shut my mouth.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, I'm clearly judging here. But just meeting you for 3 seconds, it's like I know what I'm gonna get. You got a pentagram tattooed on your finger, while you've got Jesus over here. And when you walked in, my son, he's 6 years old. He's like, Dad, why does that guy have all the stuff in his face? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'll ask him. We'll have a good conversation about it. But it's like, it's not like you're walking in as some choir boy and then I'm, gasp, clutch my pearls. I don't know what I'm getting. People have to know what they're getting with you, right? Or they can go to your Instagram and see it.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I have so much stuff on social media at this point that people can definitely get an idea before they ever show up. And anybody that books me already knows. Mm-hmm. And so it's just with the club owners, in a way, I don't blame them because in a lot of cases, they're just scared because for the last couple of years, that has been a really big thing where
Right.
people really will try to, show up and boycott certain comics. I haven't had people actually show up. That's been very disappointing.
You're disappointed nobody's showed up for a public boycott?
Well, because they all threaten,
Right.
And so sometimes you'll have media that wants to interview you about that, but they're send us some footage after you leave the event, of them boycotting.
Right.
And then they don't show up to boycott, and it's like, now we don't really have a story, It's just...
You're like, I was going to get some free publicity about the boycott, and then these pansies didn't even have the balls to show up and boycott.
Yeah, and sometimes it's, good, well, for me, good online publications as far as, because for a comic like me, being gay and Latino, if Breitbart in 2016 wanted to deal with you, that was really cool just because they're so the opposite. So,
Right.
And I know Breitbart has a terrible reputation.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
I'll read anything.
Well, and that's the thing, so people see that and it right away perks their ears. Well, there was a time where I was in talks with Breitbart because, again, the LGBT community was trying to boycott a show I was doing. And it was for gay pride. It was a gay pride It was a gay pride comedy festival, and I was asked to headline it. And so I agreed to headline it. And then 2 days before the show, they start this big thing, and they're what they do that a lot of people don't realize they do is it'll be no joke, no lie, 2 or 3 people that each have 10 email addresses. And so they'll just make the club think they're getting flooded, or the venue think that they're getting flooded with 30 emails because 30 people are upset, not realizing
Right.
it's 3 people with 10 email addresses each.
Yeah.
Just wording them slightly differently to make it seem like, oh, you better be scared. And so that one, we went ahead and went through with it. Because I just reminded them, this is 2 days before the show. You're
Yeah.
still going to have to pay me. So if you want to pay me, I'm going to show up at your event. I'm going to get my money right then, and I'm going to show them the check while I'm leaving so everybody knows that I still got paid and I didn't actually have to work.
And showing up to that specific event, was there any ruckus or any boycotting or anybody, or was it just like 90% of the people were having a great time and 10% of people were turned off and who cares? You can't please everybody.
It was so great, and it was in LA, and it turned out that that was the district of one of the city council members, I think it was, that I had done a fundraiser for him. So since he heard I was going to be there, he showed up and presented me with an award.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I posted it on my Instagram later that night, and I was like, you bitches are going to fuck around and get me a key to the city if you're not careful.
All right, so I want to get away from that because that's not the most interesting part about you. The most interesting part about you is the comedy. Talk to us a little bit about the journey of wherever you were and whoever the type of person you were who decided, you know what I want to do for a living? I want to tell jokes for a living. Because that's a weird genesis.
Well, I've had a weird life altogether.
I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I know. I look very normal, very everyday. I'm just like anybody else.
Totally.
Yeah. So, when I was younger, I did all the regular bullshit everybody does, like McDonald's. I worked for every fast food place. I worked for grocery stores. I did all that stuff. I dig ditches for a short while for the cable company in Phoenix, which was the hottest, most annoying job I ever did. I ended up just leaving one time when the boss called me stupid or asked me if I was stupid. And then, he had a rake in his hand because he was like trying to show me how to rake rocks, which I'm sorry, I didn't know how to fucking rake rocks before that. I never had to do that. So it's like, he got mad because I wasn't fast enough with it. And then he called me stupid. And then he was like, where the fuck are you going? Because I was walking to my truck. I was just like, yeah, that's not happening.
That's a day.
Yeah, I just went ahead and left. And so I did all that stuff. Then I was a sex worker for a while because, like being young and gay and Mexican and having a lot of rich white men like you when you're young just puts it in your head that like, hey, maybe instead of getting my heart broke by these assholes and thinking they actually love me, I should just take money from them and, not ever have to deal with.
How old were you when this was going on?
I think my first boyfriend was 23 and I was 17, and he owned a business, so he used to buy me a lot of shit. So that's where I first figured out, like, I can get a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was like 18, I was running ads. At that time, there were magazines.
Right. So this is like pre-Craigslist.
Yeah.
This is LA area, Phoenix area?
Phoenix.
Yeah,
Phoenix is where I started. And then, in Phoenix, I quickly realized that there just wasn't enough money there to make it worth it for me. And like I was the king of saying no, and I joke about this on stage now, but it's 100% true. In sex work, depending on what type of person you are and depending on what people like about you, in a lot of cases, you can make more money saying no than you do saying yes. And so where people have this idea that you're just having sex all the time and that you're basically just a fucking mattress, you know what I mean? Like, that's not really the reality of it. There is a lot more thinking involved with it. There is a lot more, like, kind of stringing people along. And these are also, like, you're an 18-year-old kid, and these are grown men that have made, in a lot of cases, millions of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not dumb people. So when you're stringing them along, you're not really stringing them along. It's a game you're both playing.
Right.
And so so I quickly realized that there wasn't enough money in Phoenix to really make it worth it for me. And I had met some guy in some shitty fucking motel in Phoenix that had told me that the guys in Vegas made a lot of money. And so I moved here to Vegas, and, that was the first time I lived here, and I lived here for about 4 years at that point. And by the time I got to Vegas, I think I was 19 or 20, and I had a fake ID. And so, And
I just got to ask, and you can always tell me, shut the fuck up. was there trauma in your youth that led to some of that? Or was that just like, hey, this is kind of what I just know the gay community to do, or this is what I need to do for survival? Because you say it so flippantly, like, oh yeah, you're a sex worker for a few years. I think for a lot of people, they're probably taken back by that and be like, well, does that mean he was abused as a kid? Or does that mean, there's just a lot, there's a lot to unpack there when somebody says I was a sex worker, whether you're a man or a woman.
Well, yeah, and there was, but at the same time, there also was just me, like, I had more trauma from working for fucking McDonald's, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, God. 100% getting kicked off of YouTube, Chris. Just compared McDonald's to sex work. Awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's true. I mean, like my straight jobs, my regular jobs were what were really abusive. And so, like, when it came to sex work, it was just kind of like, well, here's a thing where I don't really have to do a lot and I make a lot of money. And so why would I continue to, like I said, digging trenches for the cable company? Like, why would I want to do that when I've got a different option that makes a lot more money? And, like, it's not, you don't work for hours when you're doing sex work, I mean, like, nobody lasts hours.
It's a great minutely rate. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make light of your situation.
It really is, though. You know what I mean? Like,
so all right. So that period of your life passes, but I have to imagine the percentage of people that get out of that work without, serious physical damage, mental damage, drug abuse, whatever, evil vice we want to plug in there. How do you move out of that and then decide to move? Did comedy come right after that? Or was there a aha moment where you went to work for a church for a while and then found comedy? Or like what happens in between?
Well, there's a couple things about me. I like kind of being dumb or having people think I'm dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I have fun with that, but I'm not actually dumb. So there's that, and then also I've got like a different kind of focus. So like I was able to find work always easily, and I have a good personality. And so when I got tired of that, eventually what happened with that is I did get to a point where I just didn't want strangers touching me anymore. And so I did like just kind of mentally aged out of it, where I was like, all right, well, I'm kind of done with people touching me.
Yeah.
And so I decided to get out of that, and I got a job in an office and was living a very regular life, and I had a boyfriend and we were, super cool. But like, it wasn't long in between that and stand up. And then what eventually happened was my sister ended up dying.
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, she, and she had been like, because she was a sex worker as well. She was a stripper though. And, but we were super close and we were always hanging out, and, growing up, we weren't allowed to have a lot of friends. My parents were kind of strict in that way. And so, when you're not allowed to have a lot of friends outside of the house, then you get closer with the people that live inside your house. Yeah. And so my sister was my best friend. She ended up dying. And then like shortly after that, I think like it wasn't like a conscious thing, but subconsciously there was that life's too short type of mentality. And I knew that I could make my friends laugh always until they couldn't breathe. And then one day I was like, in my head, I remember like having all of my friends laughing so hard they couldn't breathe, and thinking in my head that I should be making money for this. And when I was super young, I had an unusual fascination with stand-up comedy. Like when I was like 9 years old, I loved Louis Anderson. I loved Ellen DeGeneres. This was before she ever came out.
Right.
But even me being a kid, I knew she was a lesbian,
on.
Yeah.
It's like that scene in Austin Powers where he's like, Liberace was gay? And they're like, oh, yeah, shocking. Came out of the closet in his 60s.
Exactly. And there were all of those, back when we were like, George Michael was another one.
Right. Elton John. Shocking. Married to a woman. Really? When my dad told me Elton John and Freddie Mercury were married to women, even as a teenager, I was like, really?
Elton John came out as bisexual at a point, and people bought that. You know what I mean? And it was like, well, you just say you're gay already.
Yeah, you're not fooling nobody.
Yeah, stop playing with us. But, So I loved stand-up when I was a kid, but growing up in the part of Arizona that I grew up, which is a town called Casa Grande, which has gotten bigger now, but it's still not huge. You know, it's halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, and you don't think that's at all possible,
Right.
you know. And so one day it was after I had that night where I was making my friends laugh to that point where I thought in my head that I should make money doing this. Then I was watching Ellen DeGeneres Here and Now. That was the HBO special she had out at that time. And I was, you know, just laying on the living room floor watching that with the guy that I was living with at that time, which was a really good relationship. Like, that was, like, you know, probably the healthiest relationship that I probably ever had, you know. But I, like, told him, I was like, I could do that, you know. And then he was like, I know you could. And then, like, then everything just lined up in a really strange way, because my mom gave me this article that was on, I think it was Terminator 3 was the movie that it was on. And it was from the New Times magazine. And I never read the stuff my mom gives me. She always gives me newspaper clippings and stuff like that, you know, like, you should read this, you should check this out. And it's very rare that I actually do, just because I never do. You know, it's my mom. I love her. But at the same time, it's like, Mom, I think it's cute. We think I read. But I actually read that one. And when I got to the end, it said that review was actually written by a comedian by the name of Jimmy Donnelly, and Jimmy Donnelly runs a weekly open mic at the Sets in Tempe, a venue called the Sets in Tempe, and then it gave like a couple details, like, you know, anybody can show up type of thing, and so I snuck over there like I was having an affair, like a week later, and then I just watched it. And then at the end, he made an announcement where he was like, if anybody wants to try this next week, you know, come up and talk to me. And so I went over and talked to him. And, you know, he put me on the list for the following week. And I wrote 5 minutes, and I didn't remember any of it when it came time for me to do it.
I was going to say 5 minutes is a lot. Knowing some people that have come up in comedy, Mike being one of them, 5 minutes, people don't think 5 minutes is a long time, but 5 minutes is a long time to hold a story or a joke or a train of thought.
I wrote it. I practiced it. I wrote down, like, words, bullet points to remind me on my hand. And then I was so nervous when I was watching the other comedians that I was doing that the whole time. And it didn't hit me that I was rubbing my hand on my pant leg the whole time. And then I went on stage, you know, still so nervous. Yeah.
Nothing to cheat. No cheat sheet.
Yeah,
Fuck.
that's exactly what happened. Like, the whole audience saw me, like, get stunned, and they knew what was up, and everybody started laughing. And, you know, I maybe did 2.5 minutes. It might have even been 1.5 minutes or something, you know, but it was just the shortest thing. But I had gotten laughs for the time that I was up there, and I knew right away. I was like, yeah, I can come back and do this.
So I want to, if there's any way for you to recall that first 2.5 minutes on stage, I feel like there's got to be something that clicks in your brain, like your brain is wired differently than mine. Because if I was standing on stage nervous and feeling unprepared for 2.5 minutes, 0% chance I ever try that again.
I had the worst stage fright, and it stayed with me, the stage fright. But like, you know, I just knew that I could get it. You know, I knew that. I don't know why, but I was like, you know, I just know that if I continue to do this, then I'll get it. You know, and so I moved from that to, like, just being very, very scripted, and I tried different things to, like, one of the things that I would do was I would turn the TV all the way up and still, like, rattle off my set, and so the TV would serve as, like, a distraction, and I'd, like, try to stay focused by doing that, because, you know, I was trying to do things to simulate being in a room full of people.
Right.
And so, and then the stage part fright, that's why I went to LA right away, you know, because, like, maybe 4 months after I did my first open mic, at that time in Phoenix, again, you'll find a pattern. Like, right. Arizona has always never been good for shit, is what you notice. It wasn't good for whoring. It wasn't good for comedy.
It wasn't good for raking the rocks.
There's nothing. There's nothing to do in Arizona. I don't know why my parents are still there.
Oh, my goodness.
But yeah, so I right away, because at that time, now there's a lot more to do in Phoenix, but at that time there were very few shows you could do, and I was like, I have such bad stage fright that I'm never gonna get to where I need to be, because I knew the thing was stage fright, you know, because I had watched some show on MTV that said, like, you know, that the only way to get rid of a phobia or a fear is to just keep doing it over and over, keep exposing yourself. And so, you know, and I had done everything I could do in Arizona as far as like trying, you know, like including on Wednesday nights, they would have an open mic in Tucson, which is an hour away from Phoenix, and you do 3 minutes, and I would drive, you know, 3 hours round trip to do 3 minutes. And I was doing that as much as I could.
Wow.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm never going to grow at this rate. So what I did was, at the time, there was a website called Chuckle Monkey, and that was like the website that told you where all the mics were, like all over the country. You know, the guy would get emails from people or phone calls, whatever, you know, but he built up this list, and it showed you, you know, it had like a map of the United States and dots all over it, like showing you where the most were, and it was like LA or New York. And even though, you know, like my appearance in my life would probably make people think I don't have a good relationship with my family or my parents, I love my parents very much. They're my favorite people. So awesome. I knew that New York wasn't an option because it's too far. I wouldn't be able to get back and forth to my parents as much as I'd want to. And so I moved to LA, and then, you know, there I went through the whole, like, everything you do as a comedian, like, you know, living in your truck for a while, your car, and like all that stuff, you know.
So I know what this looks like for an aspiring comedian who's trying to get that first paying gig. But can you talk the audience through, like, what does a week look like when you're trying to go from venue to venue to venue to get 2 minutes to kiss up to this door guy, to, you know, pay $20 to get on this stage, to drive over here to get a free beer? Can you explain what a week in the life of Ty look like when you were first, like, just trying to hone in your craft and get that first paid gig?
Yeah, well, you know, for me, it really was like, I knew nothing about LA, and I hadn't done any real research. One of the things, though, that really encouraged me was when I first went there to kind of check things out, because, you know, I went for like a couple of days to check things out, and I went to the Laugh Factory. That was one of the first open mics that I did, not realizing that the open mic at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood is called an open mic, but it's not really an open mic. It's more of a showcase. And at that time, especially, Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory, used to sit in a booth in the corner, and he would watch all the comedians, every single one of them, and he would critique you after the show. You would all go upstairs, line up. He'd sit in the corner like a mafia don, you know, and like you'd all walk up. And, like, you know, a lot of people, he'd just tell you, come back in 4 weeks. Like, that was his standard, you know, come back in 4 weeks, come back in 4 weeks. Like, he would tell people like that. But if he liked you, he would actually talk to you. So
was it like, come back in 4 weeks, that's code for you suck, you should leave the business? Or was it like, hey, I just don't have time for you, work on your craft. Actually, you can come back in 4 weeks.
You got to get better. You know what I mean? So give it a minimum of 4 weeks was what he was saying. It didn't actually mean... There were people that would be like, Jamie told me to come back in 4 weeks. And it was like...
You're like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
God, bless your heart, right? Like, people in the South saying bless your heart really
exactly.
means fuck you.
Yeah. It really... Well, yeah. And you'd just be like, oh that's
cute.
Nice. You know what I mean? Jamie told me to come back in 4 weeks. You know, they'd go back to the club. The club would be like...
No, hard pass.
Sign up, whatever. You know, like, if you get here early, you know, because that one was brutal, and it still is, from what I hear. Like, you had to show up at like 2 p.m. because they only take like the first 10 or whatever. But since that's what I was dedicated to, like, I was willing to do whatever. So I made it there the way that I was supposed to and stuff. And so when Jamie got to me, and I wasn't the only one, there were other people that he had talked to as well. But, you know, you didn't know if you were going to get a come back in 4 weeks or if he was going to actually talk to you. And with me, he was like, you're a really good writer. He was like, I can already tell that. He was like, but I can tell you're very green. I can tell you're very nervous. And then he asked me specifically, he was like, where do you live? And I was like, I live in Arizona. And then he was like, do you plan to move to LA? And I said, yes, I do. And then he was like, when do you plan to move to LA? I was like, probably within the next couple of months. And then he was like, I would say that you should move here immediately. Stage time. He was like, come back in 4 weeks. And, you know, so since he had told me, and then, you know, after that, I didn't go back for a while because I knew I wasn't ready. And I got an idea that he actually wanted you to be somewhat formed before you showed up. And so then once, so to answer your question though, like what it was like for me when I actually got there, it literally was going to every mic that I could possibly go to. I didn't waste time kissing anybody's ass, and it wasn't because I thought I was above it, because I was brand new and I would have done anything. But for me, I knew that I was too, like, my stage fright was too bad for me to even kiss anybody. It would have been pointless. You know what I mean? Like, there was no reason to kiss anybody's ass. There was no product at all, you know?
Yeah.
And so it really was just to keep my head down, practice as much as I can. At the time, you know, it wasn't like phones are like they are now, where you have voice memo. So I had a little, you know, those little mini tape.
Oh yeah, little mini recorders.
Yeah.
I used to have one of those when I'd like wake up in the middle of the night and had an idea. I'd be like, don't forget to call on the Jones loan. And then I'd wake up in the morning to like 3 voice texts from myself, and I'm like, I'm a freak.
Yeah, I still have a shitload of those little. I have nothing to play them on, you know, and I don't know if they'd even play anything, you know, but like I still have a shitload of those little, because what I would do was, because, you know, I was just, there wasn't, it wasn't like now where you have so many online resources and whatever else, you know?
Right.
And so, like, I just had to put this together myself. So it was like, if I record every one of my sets and listen to them, so I'd go from one spot to the next, one open mic to the next, and I would listen to it on my way to the next one, and I'd try to tweak it between that and the next one, or if it went well, I tried to duplicate it the same way. And so I was really good about that, and like I said, that was my only reason for being in LA. And you know, I'm still, you know, pretty young, so I would still do fun stuff every once in a while, you know, and once in a while just finally fuck off and go to a club and be like, all right, I'm gonna blow off some steam now. But I was so dedicated, and I became really well known kind of quickly. One, because I was honestly, when I started, I was the only gay comedian that was actually going to all of the open mics. All of the other gay open micers only went to like the shows in Silver Lake, West Hollywood, you know, the gay areas and the gay bars.
And you're like, fuck it, I'll drive to San Bernardino to get my 3 minutes.
Yeah, because I just had to get rid of this stage fright, and I had to get better. And so with me, like a minimum of 3 to 5 open mics a night.
And you're doing this how many nights a week?
Every night of the week.
Every night. So you're trying to get in 20 to 35 couple-minute sets every day, all day, and then going back and writing, and then listening to your recordings. I mean, that's a fucking grind. And how long did you do that, months or years, until you're like, sweet, somebody's willing to pay me money for this shit?
Well, I ended up getting paid. The first time I got paid was probably when I was like a year and a half in, but it was only like $10, you know. And then from there, then I started getting, you know, like, because LA doesn't pay a lot. Like, even when you do, a lot of people don't realize that. Like, Comedy Store to this day, and this includes like Chris Rock, Bill Burr. This is the original room, you know, which is the one most people think of. Yeah. In the original room, it's $1 a minute is what they get, and everybody does 15 minutes, so you get $15, you know, for each set.
Shit.
And then, but in the main room, you know, and for the weekend, they get a lot more money. The way that works is a different system, you know, and so they'll get like, you know, a decent, like, you know, if you're a regular person, a decent amount. If you're Chris Rock or Bill Burr, it's, you know,
all bets are off.
Yeah, you don't care. You're just there for the stage time. But you know, like a lot of the comics that used to do the road a lot, once they become Comedy Store regulars and can work the main room, then they'll decide to work the road a lot less, because, you know, they can make just as much money or around the same amount of money working at the Comedy Store on the weekends if they're popular. But, you know, and popular with the club, you don't have to be popular in general.
I want to put this in perspective. You know, you're doing 3 minutes, driving half an hour, doing 3 minutes, driving an hour, doing 5 minutes, driving half an hour, doing 3 minutes. You're doing this for a year and a half before you made $10.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a level of commitment that, like, to me, that kind of parallels, like, Olympic athletes. Like, I swim 3 hours a day, every day, from the time I'm 12 time I'm 8 until I'm, like, 19 to try to get a shot for the Olympic trials, and I've made no money yet. Like, to me, it might as well be the same thing.
Yeah, then I bumped it up to 5 to 7 mics a night. And so, you know, and, like, now sometimes comics are kind of shitty with each other. I notice a lot of people are really nice to me because I've done a lot of stuff now, because I've done Comedy Central a couple of times. I've toured with some really big comics. Gabriel Iglesias is one person. He put me on his, he had a show called Stand Up Revolution on Comedy Central. I did that. I worked with Joe Coy for a year and a half. I've worked with Russell Peters. More recently, I've worked with Tim Dillon. I've worked with a lot of really big comics and, got some TV credits and that kind of stuff. So people are, for the most part, nice to me. But, now comics with the newer comics, or I should say newer comics with newer comics, aren't always the nicest. But when I was starting out, especially back then, because everybody saw the way that I was really trying, and I had to be really scripted because I still had the stage fright,
Right.
So the way that I could deal with that. So not only are you dealing with stage fright, you're dealing with being gay, at a time where gay isn't like it is now.
Right.
And so you had to make sure you had your ducks in a row, or I did. I really
Right.
had to make sure that I knew what I was going to say next. My jokes, my set had to be drum tight. I knew that. And so because the other comics saw how hard I was working, it got to a point where I could call the other comedians when I'd be on my way to their open mic and be like, hey, I'm coming out from San Bernardino or from Riverside right now, and I'm almost there, and they would stretch for me if they were we just finished the last comic, we'll go ahead and stretch a little bit so that you can get here.
That's cool.
And so but it was literally, that's what I was, and that's how I got to know so many people in LA, because people really respected my work ethic. Later on I became an asshole. And
But did you really become an asshole, or did the times just changed?
well, really things just changed, and I'm not one of those people that's afraid of change, and I don't mind it.
Right.
But at the same time, when you're asking me to change things that I don't think need to be changed, then I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And that's what started to happen with some of the comedians. And when we were talking about LGBT in general, it's well, if I've already made it to a point just in my personal development where I don't get my feelings hurt because of what strangers think about me, and also look at me. If I cared what people thought about me, I might as well just kill myself now. People walking down the street have opinions about me. People at the gym have opinions about me. The weird thing, though, is since I got the eye tattoo, which is within the last couple of months, a lot more strangers approach me in a very friendly way. I don't know
Really?
why. People love to talk to me about this tattoo.
About the eye tattoo.
Yeah, they'll be like, did that hurt? And then they'll just start conversing
All
with
I
me.
would want to know is how many people did you kill in prison? If I saw your tattoo across the eye, I'd be like, all right, did you kill 7 or 8 people?
Yeah,
in
there's
prison?
that too.
That would be
Yeah,
my
or
first
people,
question.
Yeah, assume that I must have done time. Every gangbanger gives me a second look,
Yeah,
sort
they're
of
like, hey, where'd you go?
where's he from, but yeah, so I when it comes to those kinds of things, I just don't really, care what people think, and so I don't understand why so many LGBT people get their feelings hurt about everything. But if they do, that's fine. I don't care about that. But you're not going to talk me into going back to a point where I give a fuck what people think about me. And
Right.
why would I accept that? Why would I give into that? Which is what some people get frustrated with me for, because I refuse to be offended by things that don't matter.
So are there jokes that a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you're coming up on 20 years in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Are there jokes that you're like, man, this used to fucking kill 10 years ago and now it's off limits? I mean, even if you would be willing to say it, you're like, the crowd has just moved on. I can't get a laugh out of that. Or in the darkness of the room when the cell phones are off and people's friends aren't judging them, they're still laughing at the same shit.
Yeah, no, people are still great. And also in that way, because obviously I haven't had big mainstream success yet. You haven't heard of me, and I'm fine with that too, because the thing that I've had happen for my entire career in comedy is I've always been really far ahead of everything else. And that's real. I'm not tuning my own horn. It's just what it is. You can listen to my album. I have an album on iTunes. That's just my name. It's called Ty Rivera, if anybody wants to check it out. But you can listen to it now. I recorded it 10 years ago, and you can listen to it now, and it still sounds current, you know?
Right.
And so, if anything, like I sometimes have to slow myself down a little bit because I'm like, okay, this is further ahead than any of these people are at yet. And so sometimes, especially if I also forgot to tell you, I perform in a lot of redneck clubs.
Really?
Yeah, like that's a lot of what I do.
Shut the fuck up.
I swear to God, it's been my thing.
So people that want to be offended or have a certain perception of the world, they would assume, oh, you walk into some redneck bar with a bunch of Trump MAGA hats, you know, you're going to get killed or assaulted in the parking lot, or they're going to boo you off stage, and you don't experience that at all.
No, they love me. They're very nice to me. Afterwards, they want to talk to me. They'll ask me questions. That's why I tell other LGBT people all the time, like, every once in a while, just extend yourself and make a friend. And every once in a while, when somebody asks you a question, treat them like they're being genuine rather than they're trying to offend you. Because people will ask me offensive questions about being gay. But it's like, I don't take it that way. I take it like, oh, okay, well, if you're seriously going to ask me that question, then I'll give you a serious answer.
Right.
And sometimes because I'm so blunt about the way that I say things, I'm not at all trying to shock them, but I will. And then they'll start laughing, and then suddenly we're friends. You know what I mean? Just because they're like, okay, I can't believe he said that. Well, you're the one that asked me about that. If you're going to ask me about gay sex and I give you an honest answer, and it makes you blush and laugh, and then we both start laughing, you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden we're friends, you know, Now we're in a conversation. Now you don't feel nervous around me. Now you're more likely to be cool with the next gay person you meet because you've already had a gay person be nice with you. Yeah. And that's what I tell, like, you know, especially some of the more militant trans people, you know, I've tried to talk to them about that. They get mad at me because I just give them what's good advice. And it's like, okay, so let me understand this. Why should I listen to you if you would go into a place where I could make friends and you'd get your ass kicked? Like, how does it make sense that I'd be looking to you to be my life coach?
Right.
You know, it makes no sense. It's like I'm supposed to what? Like, not be nice to people that maybe don't know how to be nice to me at first? Because in a lot of cases, that's what they're doing. They're trying to be nice to me. They're trying to start a conversation.
Right.
And so if they accidentally use the word fag, and I can tell that they're not meaning it in a hateful way, and they're not trying to, like, you know, goad me into anything. They just accidentally used it because that's the word they use with their friends usually. Yeah. If I just completely sidestep that and treat them like, you know, they used another word like gay or whatever politically correct term, I'm fine with fag.
Yeah.
You know, but if I just completely don't acknowledge that and just talk to them like a human being, and then it's like, you know, we have a good conversation, then, you know, why would I have wasted time getting angry? Or how would that be beneficial, not only to myself, but just in general, if you're about LGBT acceptance and whatever the fuck else you claim you're about?
Yeah. You know, it's weird because I was in the Army from 97 to 2000 in like the most redneck alpha male unit in Fort Riley, which was kind of like a low-speed unit. This is not like Special Forces or Navy SEALs or anything like that. But it was like pretty redneck Kansas, Fort Riley, middle of the country. And in no way thinking that we were being offensive to the homosexual population. Yeah. When I needed like a 3/8 wrench and somebody bought me a 1/4 wrench, I was like, oh, that's gay. Like, it just doesn't fit. You know, the hole doesn't go in the screw doesn't go in the right hole. And it was, I understand the connotation came from being being negative towards gays. But it wasn't, I swear it wasn't said that way. Like, we wouldn't have gone to a bar that night, ran into a gay couple and be like, oh, these motherfuckers, they don't deserve to be in here. And so when I got out of the Army, it came out of my mouth a few times when I was working at a bank where I'm like, oh, that's gay. You know, the ATM machine wouldn't fit in the right hole. And then somebody would be like, oh, you can't say that. And I was like, yeah, okay, I know I shouldn't say that, but I promise you I'm not saying it in like anger or disrespect. And it's something that should exit the nomenclature, and I get that. But to your point, it took somebody who was gay being like, hey, man, just so you know, I don't care, but some people are going to take that really offensively. And so, like, just maybe curtail that a little bit. I'm like, all right, fuck, I got to watch my mouth. Like, this is just bad. Just like when I got out of the Army, I used to say fuck every other word. And it's still a habit that I'm breaking. I remember one time I was at my buddy's house, and it was like, fuck, 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 fuck. And his dad pulled me aside, my buddy Bob, and he's like, hey, man, just so you know, my wife's in the room. We don't have to say fuck every other word. And I was like, oh, dude, sorry, just bad. You know, it was offensive to her because she was like a very devout Christian. It was like bad habit that I picked up from the Army. But it wasn't like I was trying to offend her. And I feel like in 2022, damn if everybody's just trying to be offended by everything.
Yeah, well, and I tell people that all the time, like the people that I talk to, and, you know, when I'm in redneck spots, I'll tell people, don't talk like we're talking right now at work. You will get fired.
Right.
You know, just, I'm fine with you talking to me like this, but don't go back to work and tell them what I told you, or like, you know, but because I like, yeah. And I get why that's a thing. I do get it at the same time, you know, but you're right when it comes to the, like being offended by everything and people looking to get offended. But I think we're really moving out of that now.
I hope so.
Yeah, I really feel like we are, because so many people just get it. And Gen Z really is a lot more balanced than millennials were.
Really? How so?
They're just they actually can take a joke, and it's like Gen Z is, a lot of the people that I know that are Gen Z are actually a perfect balance, because they are very open to things like, you know, accepting people's pronouns, how people identify, LGBT, all that stuff. But then if you make a joke in front of them, they can understand that it's actually a joke and where you're coming from. So It seems like they're a bit more emotionally intelligent.
Nice.
Where it's kind of like millennials, for me, and I'm not one of those people that really rails on, like, you know, millennials are so terrible, whatever. Right. They're whatever, you know what I mean? They're like anybody else. There's good and bad.
Good and bad in every community, quote unquote.
Exactly.
Give me a break. Like to give a monolith of a community, like all veterans are like this, or all homosexuals are like this, or all millennials are like that. It's like, give me a fucking break. I know some loser millennials, and I know some millennials that are way ahead of me, and they've built multi-million-dollar companies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's stupidity to classify a whole group of people.
Yeah, but that generation, a lot of what they had pushed on them was like blanket rules. Like, you never say these words. You never, you know, and so I think with Gen Z, they've just like realized that context matters.
Yeah, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that
it doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. You know, even if you personally get triggered for a second, sometimes you need to be triggered. Sometimes you should be triggered.
Yeah, we should all be offended. Like,
yeah.
I want to go to a comedy club and hear a joke about middle-aged fat white guys who are mildly successful and trying to relive their teenage glory days by doing jiu-jitsu at 43. Like, I want to hear that joke.
Very
right?
specific.
Yeah, very specific. I don't know who I could possibly be talking about.
That's very specific.
Yeah, I don't know who I could be. So if you could craft that joke for me, I'll come to your next set. But it's like, our mutual friend Mike Eaton has this joke about military people, right? And he does this whole setup, and he's like, yeah, and you guys were willing to die for your country for a new Camaro. Because every military guy, when they get their sign-on bonus, they go buy a new Camaro, right? Mm. And he tells that joke in a mixed crowd, and you can hear a pin drop. He tells that joke in front of a bunch of veterans, and the room is howling.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because they can take a joke, and they can laugh at themselves. And I'm like, dude, come on. That's what comedy is there for. Now, I understand I'm in a professional setting, and, you know, somebody makes fun of the size of my dick or something, and that might not be the right setting. But if I go to a comedy club, how can you possibly get offended at a comedy club?
Oh yeah, and there's very, like, you know, if it's done well, there's very few people that get offended. Again, I've had it, like, one time these lesbians left and said that they told the club owner, this was in Minnesota, and I can't remember the name of it was right outside of Minneapolis, but it was this club in Minnesota, and these lesbians told the owner on their way out that I was a gay man doing homophobic jokes.
Oh, man.
And so it was just like, you know, all right, well, I guess I'm not for them. I don't really care.
Yeah, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of the art of comedy, because we talked about, you know, your personal lived experience, which is one of my favorite terms, and then we talked about kind of like what it's like on, on the road and growing the hustle when you're up and coming. I want to talk a little bit about the art of comedy, and maybe we can start here, because this is something that's really interesting to me. You know, I go to a Chappelle show or whatever, And now they make you put your phone in the little RFID, sealed bags because he's working on what's going to be a multi-million-dollar Netflix special. Or I would go see Joe Rogan at the Ice House. I probably saw him 20 times when he was working on bits, telling this joke with the punchline being a Prius or the punchline being a minivan or the punchline being a Camaro or whatever. And you would see that. And like, if you took out your cell phone, security was on you to take you out of the room. But now with, I would say comedians that don't quite have that cachet, like you've got to put some stuff out there on social media. You've got to put some of your bits and your jokes. So for you, the art versus the craft versus the business, and I've seen some of your social media, what's the balance of like, all right, I want to put some good stuff up on social media, but I can't give away all my content because if that social media gets Scott to the show, and then he's seen all my jokes, it's just going to kind of land flat. So where are you finding that balance between like your art, your in-person craft, and then like the business of, well, I gotta build a social media following by telling some jokes. Like how do you manage that? Because that's kind of interesting to me. Like what do you give out there as the teaser and what's the headliner jokes when I actually come see you in person?
Well, jokes are always evolving for me. Some people, just they write a joke and they're done with it. Like jokes in my set are always evolving for me. And I always find different ways in and out of things. And so in a lot of cases, that's what'll excite people about my set is even if they've seen a joke online, watching how I work my way into it is what'll make them laugh or what'll make them, and also then they feel like they're on the inside, because it's like, oh, I heard this one. I know this one. I just didn't realize that's what he was going into.
So you're changing the setup or the story or whatever.
Yeah. And it changes every night. Like people can come watch me. People can watch me 2 shows in a row and they won't get the same show. They will get some of the same jokes, but they won't get the same show. And even that, I'll vary the jokes a lot. And it's partly because I don't have the best memory in the world. So for me to memorize a set at this point, especially 45 minutes or an hour. And it's also because I don't want to be bored. So if I can keep myself interested, the audience is going to have more fun because I'm interested in what I'm saying. I'm not just running through it like a recorder, And so, so I don't really worry about that very much. Sometimes I'll, later on regret putting a joke on my social media, but that'll only be because sometimes I'm like, yeah, I should have waited for a show where I maybe did it better.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? I liked what it evolved to later on.
Yeah.
And I would like to have that up instead of the version that I have.
So you're kind of critiquing your first draft, your second draft, and you're like, man, I'm on the 10th draft of this joke. That's landing so much better. I kind of want to take down that first draft.
Yeah, but I don't care. I'll leave it. I don't really care because nobody, unless they're psycho, nobody's going to really go through your stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you got any psycho fans?
I have. Yeah. But, it's like, I think I can make them lose interest by being overly accessible.
Really?
Yeah,
Tell me more about this.
I just don't I don't really care about anything. And so I think they just get well, if you're not going to be scared.
Right. I mean, you're a pretty big imposing figure. You're a big dude. So if you're not going to be scared, that's a fine line to walk with some psycho stalkers. Yeah.
Well, and there's one person, I don't give them any air at all, but there's one person that has a dedicated hate channel to me, and that is a thing, and it's just they
on YouTube they have a dedicated channel to hating you.
Yeah, and they'll do 3-hour streams of just how much they hate me. But
did you sleep with this guy or
never?
What?
And that's what people would think. You know what I mean? Because it really is that weird. The truth is, I never even had a friendly relationship with this person.
Who has that much time in their life to do a 3-hour live stream on hating you?
Well, that's what I wonder, and that's what a lot of people get and that's why it's not very effective. And they make up a lot of things about me that aren't at all true, and then there's a lot of stuff they assume about me, and it's so there might be a point where I have to actually do a defamation suit or something like that, because they have said some things about me that maybe at some point could affect a money situation, but right. So far it hasn't happened. And the burden of proving that, is actually pretty high. You can't just defamation is one of the hardest things to prove.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
but when you're a public figure like you, someone can really fuck with your money, right? If,
yeah.
If they've really got it out for you, you know, it doesn't take too many club cancellations before you're like, man, this is really a dent in my wallet.
Yeah, well, and that's, you know, what they've tried to do in certain instances. But like with a lot of the stuff that I hear them say about me, it's just like, because it's been going on for 2 years now.
That dude is committed.
Yeah, over 2 years.
Is it
now.
a dude? I'm
yeah,
assuming
it was. June was 2 years.
Damn.
So
that dude needs to get laid.
Legit. Yeah, it really is. It really is. That one's the only one that's really been like truly weird for me because and I'm not exaggerating at all. You know, one day like might come across it just because if you ever check out my stuff, his stuff will likely come up in the recommended from YouTube just because of the way the algorithm works. And you'll see it's literally like, 2 and 3 hour streams about me. And I don't watch it, but every once in a while somebody will send me a clip or say, hey, this person is saying this about you. And what's surprising to me is how a person can study you for 2 years and still know absolutely nothing about the way you think.
That's so good.
Yeah, just like this guy doesn't get me at all. He like makes up these things where it's like, I'm this evil person and nobody that knows me, even people that don't like me or have had like, fallouts with me or whatever like that. Nobody would describe me as like evil.
Right. He's bad, but he ain't that bad.
Yeah, I'm just particular in a lot of ways. Or, I mean, like I've lived a lot of life. And so I don't put up with a lot of people's bullshit. And a lot more people walk around with a lot more baggage than I do.
Right. Right.
So I'm like a lot of times like I'll notice that. And then that's what'll stop me from hanging out with people. But it's not usually for some like, like something evil or petty. It's usually just like, yeah, you keep talking to me about this relationship that is toxic and I'm tired of hearing about it. So let's just not be friends until you grow out of the phase or until you realize that you might be worth more than you're actually showing right now.
And I think from what I've heard, because, the comedic circle is pretty small. You start running into the same people over and over again. I guess you have to be professional, but is there this thing where you've just accepted like, hey, man, we don't all have to be friends?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But also with other working comics, you usually just get along because you're all kind of dealing with the same fight until you reach the Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr level, Joe Rogan, like until you reach that. A lot of times it's like, you're getting fucked over by the same bookers. You're dealing with the same people that don't want to pay that much, or you're like, and so usually when you get to see your other comedian friends, because you'll all be on the road at different times, you'll be so happy to see each other that there's nothing to argue about, or there's nothing to, like, it's just like, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever. And, like, what's going on with this? I heard you book this, and it's like, and so many comics that are working are willing to give you like a bunch of contacts when you see them. They'll be like, there's this person you should work with here that's super cool. There's this person. Have you done this festival yet? And, it'll be more stuff like that. And it's not really competitive. Like, I don't know a lot of really competitive comics.
Yeah. It's funny because people look at Joe Rogan or Bill Burr or Dave Chappelle or whatever, like, oh, that's awesome. What a living. That guy must have the life, blah, 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 blah. And all I can think about is those dudes must have so few authentic relationships because everybody wants to get something out of you, right? Like if you're a comedian and you're talking to Bill Burr, he has to be thinking in the back of his mind, oh, this motherfucker is trying to get me to hook him up or take him on the road or whatever. Like when there's this hierarchy of, you got dudes performing after 2 years of working on their craft for $10, and then you run into some guy who's making hundreds of thousands or millions. There's got to be a weird usury relationship there where like, can these dudes even have authentic relationships and like chill and drink with a dude without always having their guard up? Like, is that a weird dynamic?
They can because they get really good at filtering them. Like Joe Rogan helps a bunch of comedians out. Like a bunch of my friends are cool with Joe Rogan, like Tony Hinchcliffe. There's a comedian by the name of Brian Simpson that just recently did a Netflix thing. Tim Dillon is a friend of mine. Like they're all super close with Joe Rogan. A comic by the name of David Lucas that just recently moved to Austin. and he's like a newer guy, you know, like
Right.
he's, well, you know, not too new, probably like 10 years in or something
So
like that.
crazy. Working on his craft for 10 years. And he's like, you know, he's kind of a newbie. Like, it's crazy, man. If I was 10 years into being a loan officer and people were like, yeah, he's funding a loan or two, I'd be like, kill me now. Just put a bullet through my fucking head that I've been working on this for 10 years and people are finally getting to know my name. I mean, it's a crazy craft.
Yeah, but the best part about that too is that like real comics all get that and don't have a problem with it. Like me, even being 19 years in, that's why sometimes I'll get in arguments with open micers, and I've kind of stopped doing that because some people will just never get it. But like the thing with open micers is I've had conversations with people where people have called me like accused me of being like a gatekeeper or trying to be a gatekeeper and trying to decide who's a comedian and who's not a comedian. And it's like, no, I told you that you weren't a real comedian because you're new and you're complaining about shit that no real comedian would complain about.
Right.
You know, you're acting like you know everything and you're 3 years in. I'm 19 years in, and I don't think I know everything. I'm learning new shit and sometimes relearning shit that I learned a couple years ago. Like, that's the way stand-up works.
Right.
And so, like, you know, with David Lucas specifically, like, you know, he's such a great guy, and he's so funny, and he's so cool. And like I said, he's probably about 10 years in now, or maybe a little under. But if he heard me say that he was newer, he'd know exactly the way I meant it, and he wouldn't take it at all as, like,
Right.
an insult or me. You know what I mean? Just like if
Yeah.
somebody that, like, Bill Burr or Joe Rogan would refer to me as being a newer guy, you know, because I'm 19 years and they're like 30.
Right.
Like, you know, I wouldn't at all get offended. I'd be like, yeah. And they're like, compared to the amount of time they've been doing it and everything they've seen, I am new.
Yeah.
So, you know, you don't really think about it that way. It's just like, you know, yeah, it's cool.
It's funny, you mentioned Tony Hinchcliffe, and I think I heard him tell this story in person, and then I heard it again on a podcast or something. He was talking about, like, working the door at the Comedy Room or the Laugh Factory or whatever and running into Bill Burr and saying something to the effect of, like, oh, you're so talented or you're so natural or whatever, and just proceeded to get chewed out for 20 minutes of, like, no, motherfucker, I come do all these sets all night, even though I'm making it, and then I wake up at 7 in the morning, I go to Starbucks, I read the paper to get all the current events, I write my joke, I script all day, I make my wife listen to this shit, my dog listen to this shit, then I come do these shitty fucking open mics with assholes, like just unloaded on him by saying, because he said, oh, you have some natural talent or whatnot, and he's like, it's one of the best lessons I ever got, because it's like, oh no, this is a fucking grind, dude. And so walk us through, like, your grind. Now that you're making it, you're a working comedian, this is how you support your livelihood. What does your day look like? Like, obviously you're not driving around Vegas 19 hours a day trying to find 3-minute open mics, but what is your day and what does your work look like now?
Well, now, because of the way social media works and because I've seen what that can do, that's why I've really been building my YouTube. And like YouTube for me, because I really think that you have to find the social media that's most compatible with you and what you do,
Right.
and just work that.
Middle-aged, chubby white guys, all about Facebook, man. All my revenue comes from Facebook.
Is it?
Yeah, totally.
Really?
Yeah. All my coaching clients, all my loan officer connections, the realtors I communicate with, it all comes from YouTube. Like, that's the demographic of your 30 to 45-year-old person that's buying a home or getting into real estate. Like, we cannot crack the YouTube code for mortgages. It's a bitch. So, but YouTube works for you. So tell me more about that. Sorry, it's about you, not me.
Oh, no, it's all good. So for me, it really is like, you know, trying to figure out what I want to make content about and what actually resonates with me. Because I'm a person that if I don't feel something, I can't do it.
Right.
And so, like with me, it really is like, I go to the gym a lot because I think that that's important. You know, like when it comes to a person like me, I think people, well, I've tried it different ways, you know, but I think people like me better when I'm physically fit.
Really?
Yeah, on stage it just translates better.
Yeah,
you know,
you don't have like the fat funny guy vibe. You have to kind of be the in shape metro gay guy, like to put you in a box. But
yeah, I talk about fucking dudes, and you know what I mean. Like that's like, you know, I joke about that, and that's my life. You know, it's not like it's, you know, oh, what am I gonna write about? It's like, what have I been doing? You know, it's just like I'm not doing it just for the sex. You know, and so. But, you know, so like that helps. So I go to the gym also. And I make no secret about this. The gym for me stands in for where other people would take meds. Like it really does balance me out, and it really does, you know, like the endorphins, everything. Like I need that. And so, so I spend a fair amount of time at the gym. I hang out with my dog quite a bit. and then I also will make content. And for me, I'm the kind of person that my content tends to be like current events type stuff. So I handle everything myself. So like yesterday, for example, I decided to make a video. Yeah, that was yesterday. And so I have to record the video, obviously. Then I have to edit it. Then in the editing, I put in whatever pictures, whatever extra media that I put in it. And so that'll take, like, honestly, on the low end, it'll take 4 hours. Sometimes it'll take 6 to 8 hours, depending on how much editing I'm doing. Then after I finish editing that, then I'll upload it. Then after uploading it, then I have to make like the shorts for it. Then I have to actually make the Instagram Reels version of it. Then I have to share it on Facebook, which is currently my strongest. Like YouTube is taking over now, but Facebook for a long time was my strongest social media platform. So I do have to promote whatever it is I'm doing on Facebook as part of it. And so like there's all of that. So like that's what takes up a lot of my day now. You know, so now it's like, and I had to break myself out of that thinking because I got so used to just doing the open mics, and, you know, that was like my grind for so long that it really did take a lot of like mental strength and discipline to finally untrain myself from that, where it's like, okay, you don't have to be at every 3-minute open mic.
Right. So you're spending, you know, sounds like somewhere between 5 and 8 hours a day just on content. And is that content then informing your set? So like if you show up to do a mic that night, or you've got, you know, 30 minutes you've got to do at a club, are you playing off of the social media take, or do you have like you're defined like this is my hour, I can walk in and kill it at any club in the country on a moment's notice?
Both.
Okay.
You know, both, because I mean, like but you know, once I got past, because once I broke out of the having to be so scripted and was able to be more natural on stage.
And how long was that, by the way? How long was it between I've got to write everything out, I've got to listen to it, I've got to try to effectively memorize a dissertation, to like, oh, I can just be me and have a little bit more of a free flow?
I don't want to make anybody lose hope, but it probably took me 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years to get totally over the stage fright, be able to get on stage and just breathe and be yourself.
Yeah, let's see, maybe even just a little longer than that, to tell you the truth. But you know, there were flashes where it would, like, I'd see, like, you know, okay, I can actually get this, but it just wasn't there yet where I could like rely on it. Like now I can go on stage and not really be thinking about anything and be like, I'll say something, you know what I mean? Like, and as soon as I find that one thing, then and like now I don't worry about like quote unquote bombing either. Right. 'Cause like, you know, if I'm doing a paid show, then obviously I'm going to do a bunch of stuff that I know already works. But if I decide to pop in at an open mic, or I decide to just do a show, I don't care if I quote unquote bomb, because I'm just going to try a bunch of stuff out. And if I just get one thing, that's going to be better than what a lot of people are getting out of what they're doing, you know, because it's like I could work on, I could kill it just by doing a bunch of stuff that I know works, but I'm not going to grow. So that's going to be like, it's not really a benefit to me. I will do that sometimes when they want me to do it, because sometimes I'll go in an open mic and they'll be like, you know, and this is a conversation people will literally have with me, where like the host of the show will be like, everybody's been eating shit tonight, so if you could just wake them up a little bit, or make them feel like their night wasn't a waste, you know, audience, we'd really appreciate that. And so then I'll be like, all right, you know what I mean? And I'll do that for them. But like, for me, there's no benefit to working on stuff I already know works. Yeah. You know, and so, you know, but it's even that's rare that I actually bomb, you know, it's just like,
as a layman from the outside looking in, and I'm embarrassed I can't remember his name, because he probably made me laugh harder than any human being I've ever met. Really tall comedian, half black, half Korean, tells a ton of jokes about growing up under a military father and a Korean wife in Texas, and like how people just didn't even know how to be racist towards him, because they were like, oh, do we tell racist black jokes? Do we tell racist Korean jokes? He is a hilarious motherfucker, and I've seen him open. I saw him at Ice House twice, and the first time I saw him, he was in that mode where he's working on stuff, didn't care if he bombed, whatever. And then we got tickets to a show, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to see this guy again. But clearly, the stage manager had come up to him and been like, hey, man, like, the openers are eating shit. Can you deliver your bit? And he went up there for 40 minutes And I have never laughed so hard in my entire life. I wasn't high. I wasn't drunk because I think I needed to work early.
Good looking guy?
Yeah, good looking guy.
Muscular?
Yeah.
Michael Yo?
Yeah, Michael Yo.
Yeah.
That fucking dude killed harder than I think and I've seen just about every famous comedian in person, and I laughed harder than I've ever laughed in my entire life. But it was crazy because just like 2 weeks earlier, I could see him and I would have been like, oh, this guy sucks. He's never going to make it. But it was because he was in different phases of his craft where he was like working on new stuff that just didn't land. And then clearly exactly what you said happened. Like the openers kind of sucked. Even the MC kind of sucked. And clearly he got pulled aside and they're like, dude, just deliver your best shit because these guys are not going to be happy about their $100 bar tab.
Yeah. Well, Michael Yo has helped out a lot of my friends, specifically a friend of mine named Nick Guerra, Nick Guerra is this week. He's at the LA Comedy Club in the Strat. And Nick's headlining there, but Michael Yo has helped him out a lot. Michael Yo used to have these shows he would do. I don't know if he still does them, but he had these shows that were just Michael Yo and Friends show, and he would bring on a bunch of up and coming comics, and he really helped a lot of people out. Most of the comics are cool like that, like Joe Rogan did that this last time when he did MGM Grand Garden Arena. Like Tony Hinchcliffe is very well established or whatever, but he had Tony on his show, he had Brian Simpson on his show, Hans Kim. I think that was the lineup for that particular night. But Joe helps a lot of people out, Bill Burr, even with his Netflix, he's been doing that, where he has his Bill Burr's friends or whatever.
Yeah.
My friend T-Rex is one of the guys that works with Bill Burr quite a bit. I also have my friend Joe Bartnick, who I've known forever. He used to write for Lisa Lampanelli, because a lot of people don't know that, but Lisa Lampanelli was pretty much all writers.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's just really great at delivering jokes, and this is nothing against her. It's just the truth,
Yeah.
But because certain comics are, when you do stand up for a long time, you realize that there really is a place for that. Some people really judge, because they're like, so-and-so is nothing but writers. Right. And I'm like, well, if the person that writes for her really isn't good at delivering their own material. Joe's a different case, but the thing was, back then when Joe was working for Lisa Lampanelli and when I'd see him at the open mics all the time, he really was in a different phase of his comedy where he didn't have any interest in being like out front.
Right.
So for him, it was perfect that Lisa would pay him so much to write so much of her material.
Yeah.
And so, but like Joe is one of the ones that, works with Bill Burr all the time now. And so it's like Joe Bartnick, T-Rex, Todd Rex is his name. He works for Bill Burr as well. And people all over the internet talk shit about Brandon Schaub. And Brandon Schaub, he's figuring it out, and he had a leg up because he knew Joe Rogan, and he got in through doing JRE, and so he had an audience. And what are you supposed to do? Say no?
Yeah, of course.
I'd rather just do open mics.
Dude was already a famous UFC fighter and almost played in the NFL, so it's kind of unfair because he's not a nobody who's got to go through open mic. It's like, you might show up because you're like, wait a minute, UFC fighter who spins some game in comedy? I would show up to watch that. So he's probably got to evolve way faster than your average comedian.
Yeah, and that takes you falling on your face in front of big crowds in some cases, or, in front of the world in some cases, because, people talk shit about his specials and stuff like that. But the thing that people don't see and the thing that people don't understand is there's a comedian by the name of Chappelle Lacey that's a really good comedian from Phoenix that got a bunch of help from Brandon Schaub. Brandon Schaub took him on the road, which Chappelle, nothing against Brandon Schaub, but Chappelle is funnier than Brandon Schaub.
Right.
Well, you have to be, very secure in yourself to bring somebody along that's going to be funnier than you, that goes up before you.
Yeah.
David Lucas is another one Brandon Schaub has helped out. So it's like, the public has these ideas of what they think's good and what's not good, and this guy's a terrible guy, and it's like, he's not a terrible guy. He told some jokes you don't like.
Right.
They weren't offensive because Brendan Schaub is an offensive comic, so it wasn't even like he offended you. It was just like, you just don't find him funny. And so now you're telling people, or on the internet saying that, he's the worst guy in the world or whatever, not realizing how many comics that are newer that he's really helping out and giving a platform to, and in a lot of cases leaving in a lot better place than they would have been if they had just been toiling away in open mics forever.
Yeah, and when you say helping out, is that what you mean? Like, hey, I'm going to take you on the road with me, and you're going to get 10 minutes every night in front of a bigger crowd than you could ever attract yourself? Or is it like, hey, I'm going to help you out by sitting at Starbucks, and we're going to fucking spitball a bunch of jokes? Like, when you say these comedians are helping other people out, what do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes, it's just financially, because if they take you on the road and they're making a lot of money, because like we talked a little bit about like, comedy and money and that kind of stuff. Like what comics make hasn't really changed a lot when it comes to feature and opener. In a lot of cases, the host of the show, even at a major club, will make $50 a show.
The host.
Yes.
The person getting up and warming up the crowd in between the comedians.
Yeah.
$50.
Well, if it's
all right,
if it's a really nice club, no, because I can tell you exactly what it is. If they're being really cool, it's $100.
Got it.
So it's between $50 and $100.
Which, by the way, my 20-year-old son, his girlfriend gets $19 an hour to roll burritos at Chipotle.
Yeah.
So for a night's worth of work, 8 hour, she's making $96, $100, $80, maybe $120 with overtime, rolling burritos, which doesn't seem nearly as stressful as getting up on stage and laying your soul in front of a bunch of drunk people.
Yeah. And so you've got to take everybody through the show. You're making $100. The feature, who's the second comedian to go up, will typically make $200 or $100, depending on the club. It's either $100 or $200. And so when you think about that, and then you figure, like, if they have to fly across the country, and you're doing what? Because a lot of headliners don't like doing they don't like doing Thursday shows, and they don't like doing Sunday shows. So that leaves you with two shows on Friday, 2 shows on Saturday. So 4 shows. So you get paid $400.
So if you're the undercard and you just flew across the country and you got to stay in a hotel in Minneapolis or whatever, if you're Tony Hinchcliffe but you don't know Joe Rogan, and you're the undercard. What did you call it? The show
feature.
The feature. So you're the feature. You're the undercard before the headliner goes on. You had to pay for your own flight out there, pay for your own hotel. I mean, Jesus Christ! I go to Chick-fil-A and it's $18.
They'll take care of your hotel usually.
Oh, that's cool.
But like you will take care of your own flight. They don't provide travel.
Yeah, and so you're making $400 working all weekend.
Yeah.
Oh,
so then if you hook up with somebody like, say, a Brendan Schaub or like Joe Rogan decides to bring you along, a lot of times they'll let you get that check, your little $400 or whatever, right, but then they'll give you a lot of money on top of it.
So what's a headliner making? Like I'm thinking of either, maybe the Belly Room or the Ice House probably fits 150 people in their first show, and they do 2 a night. So if you're the headliner, like you're not Joe Rogan, you're not Dave Chappelle, but you're the headliner, you get a 45-minute set there. What's the headliner making in a place like that?
Ice House, honestly, as headliner, you usually make like $100, $200 at the most. On the weekends, it's a different structure, but like, right, if you're talking about like a regular like
Tuesday
Thursday
night,
usually $100 at the most. Like I said, maybe 200, but it's not, that's rare. Usually it's going to be 100 at the most. I mean, like, I've worked that club a lot. I have a really good relationship with a lot of the clubs. That's what most people that have been doing this for a long time or known me for a long time. There's some people that think I'm ungrateful and kind of snotty, but like for the most part, the people that actually get me know that I'm just very realistic, and I have a very realistic idea of what money is. I'm just,
and part of that's like I don't want to say your persona. Like, I don't think you're putting a shtick out there, but if you weren't critiquing that, just knowing you for a couple hours now, if you weren't critiquing that, I wouldn't feel like you're being the most authentic version of you. So that's just part of your shtick, right? That's part of who you are.
Yeah, it's definitely just me. I mean, like, I talk this way about birthday presents. I talk this way about, I mean, like, I've always been underwhelmed.
You're like, that fucking cousin only dropped $20 on the wedding gift, and her plate was $75.
Yeah, I've always been underwhelmed by everything around me. My parents are very used to it. Like, everybody that knows me knows that this is what it is. And so, but so I don't mean to sound like that all the time, but it's just my tone and the way I am. But then, so you get these guys, these bigger headliners that will actually give the comic like some cases 2 or 3 times what the club is getting them. So now, you know, they've at least made like 1,400 for the weekend. And so then you take away their travel, which is usually $300 or $400. So at least they made 1,000 instead of, you know, 400.
So if they're working every weekend and they're, you know, getting some YouTube views and they're selling some T-shirts, like if you're getting to that point where you're a showcase but not a headliner, like, you know, you can make 50, 60 grand doing this. Like, I mean, it's a grind. You're working hard. You're on the road a lot. Maybe get some free beer. But you know, you can make 50, 60 grand. And then what's the next level? Like the headliners, do you think they're pulling in 100 grand to it? Like if Brendan Schaub wasn't Brandon Schaub and he didn't have, you know, fuck you UFC money, I'm guessing he saved well. He seems like an intelligent guy. Like, can he make 100, 150, 200 grand a year if he's really hustling and doing some, you know, shows every weekend?
Yeah, but like a lot of clubs, for if you're talking about just a regular headliner, not a name,
right?
You know, because like a decent name that you've never heard of that just has a really strong following and can sell out shows will, in a lot of cases, make, you know, like 40 grand a weekend. So that's not
40 grand a weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, that's real fucking money.
Yeah, but like if it's somebody that, like, you know, maybe doesn't sell out shows, they're just going like on a minimum or whatever.
Where the fuck is that 40 grand coming from? Because I drink a lot of Coors Lights when I go to a comedy show, but not enough to support a $40,000 a weekend, you know, comedian.
Because if they're selling out the actual, you know, because, you know, like,
so they're getting some of the door, they're getting a fee to show up because the club knows they're going to make money off the booze and stuff.
Yeah, if you're selling out the actual, because you got to remember, like, you know, now the clubs have gotten a bit bigger, but like, you know, even if you're dealing with a club that, you know, is 300 people, you know, and then you're doing Thursday through Sunday, so you're doing 6 shows.
Yeah.
You know, and there's
8 shows, right? 2 a night?
Well, a lot of times, no, because Thursday is usually 1 show, Sunday is usually 1 show.
Got it.
And then Friday and Saturday will be 2 shows a night.
So
you're doing like 6 shows at that point. And so, but, you know, like if you're just like not a name, they're not sure how it's going to go, you're not sure how it's going to go, it's probably not going to sell out, it's just going to be okay. Then in a lot of cases, that will be like anywhere between 12 and 1,800.
Yeah,
you know,
solid.
You'll make 12 to 1,800 for the weekend.
That's crazy, man. What a crazy ecosystem. So I just love learning about people's crafts and art. So you're editing the stuff, you're putting the social media up, but where are you? I'll use design for lack of a better term. Where are you designing the content? Like, are you watching other reels? Are you keeping in touch with current events? Are you observing people at the gym? Like, what's your craft? And I know you got a heart out here in a few minutes. But what's your craft for writing comedy? And maybe we'll end on that.
When it comes to writing for my set, it's my actual life. So, you know, as I get older and I get a little more away from, you know, like the casual sex, young part of gay, you know what I mean? Like doing that kind of stuff, then like things evolve. And so like, you know, but it really is just my life, you know, and situations. And so like a lot of times I will discuss like LGBT specific type things just because, you know, that's such a big part of my life as far as being part of it, but not getting it. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I can wrap my head around all of it. It's not like it's, you know, beyond me, but it's just kind of, for me, it's a lot of it seems pointless. So I make fun of it, you know, so a lot of times it's stuff that I make fun of for that. As far as YouTube content goes, that's usually like current events type stuff. You know, like I discussed the Brittany Griner thing. I discussed Dave Chappelle. Comedy specific stuff I'm usually better for, you know, because I can tell people the way things actually work, you know, where it's kind of like, okay, well, the behind the scenes on this is usually
little insider baseball.
Yeah, and people like that because, you know, like so many people have so many ideas. Like right now there's this thing online where this YouTuber has started doing comedy. And I guess he's been doing it for a little while, but now he's started this show in LA and stuff, and a lot of people are hating on it and stuff like that. And so I weighed in on it, and a lot of people are liking that because, like, there were a lot of assumptions people were making online where they were like, well, if a person's headlining, then shouldn't this happen and shouldn't this happen? And I was just like, no, that's not really the way that headlining works all the time, or that's not the way that particular situation should work out. Like you're thinking that it should work that way. Yeah. And to you, that seems logical. But a lot of people online will say things that they think are logical and state them as fact.
Yeah.
Not realizing that if you actually knew that world, it's nothing like you're thinking it is, like,
right.
It's the YouTuber has, he started a roast battle type situation, which, like I, was pretty involved with roast battle in LA. Like I wasn't part of the show. I judged a few times for them, and I would go every week, and I'm really good friends with Brian Moses and what they called the Wave, which was like, the comic relief during the show that would, like, if somebody told a really great joke, they do you remember the show Press Your Luck from back in the day?
Yeah.
They were sort of like human versions of the Whammies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they'd come out and fucking spit water in each other, like weird shit. But it was great. They'd do flips. They really planned it and they worked on it. They'd plan these stunts and stuff. But yeah, so I was very familiar with roast battle. So when this guy started a roast battle, it was like, there were things people were saying where they'd be like, well, shouldn't a headliner do this kind of thing? And I was like, wait a second, that's not a headliner. What's happening here is that would be the main event of the show. And so that person is a part of the main event, but that person's not the headliner. So if you're thinking that they get a green room to themselves and it's that kind of situation, it's not that kind of situation. That's not the way it works, But it also pissed people off somewhat, though, because they can't really argue with me because, like, I do know how that works. It's not like
you're kind of like the guy on YouTube that tells people how the magic tricks work.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm fascinated, but also maybe I'm kind of mad at the guy for giving me the insider baseball.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. All right, 2 questions to close it up because I know you got to get out of here for a show. Favorite movie and why?
Kill Bill.
Shut the fuck up, really.
Kill Bill is my favorite movie.
So you love violence.
Yeah, and especially when it's pretty.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then what are you most looking forward to? And this could either be, places that are finally coming out of the pandemic that you can go perform, or somebody you'd love to be working on stage with. Like, what are you looking forward to in this, like, next chapter of your career where you're not the young guy, you're not the Netflix special guy yet, but, like, what are you looking forward to?
This is going to sound simple and basic, but I'm looking forward to going to China again.
Really?
Yeah, when that opens up, which obviously there's...
Who the fuck knows when?
Yeah, but I had been there 3 times. I'd go once a year, and they would... because I performed there, and so they would take me to more cities each time, and, like, the first time you hate it because they seem very rude, or you know what I mean? And then the second time I felt more like, okay, well, I get this. They don't have the same idea of what's rude and the same, customs that we do. So it made more sense. And then the third time I really enjoyed it because I felt like, oh, I completely get this. And it's like you can almost make like what's normal for them, you can make a game, because when it comes to the subway there, the way they all scramble to, like, get the seats, and it'll be like they don't care about if you're an old lady, you're an old man, whatever you are.
Fuck down, right?
You just fucking get in there, and I've got a kind of an aggressive personality that works with that, so, like, the first couple of times that I went, I felt like this is rude, but by the third time I was like, I would tell the people that would help me, the people that booked me and would take me everywhere, I tell them, like, watch, I'm gonna get one of these seats.
So you're a Mexican Chinaman at heart, huh?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
That's awesome, man.
But yeah, so that's as basic as that sounds. Like, I do want to go back there again and maybe I don't know, do something big there. I like it there. They wanted me to live there, but that's not possible. I have a dog.
Yeah. They don't allow dogs in China, clearly.
They quarantine them for like 3 weeks, and supposedly they don't always come out in the best of health, and they're traumatized because they've been away from you for 3 weeks in a little cage. Fuck. They're not going to be nice with them or treat them particularly well. So
that's awesome, man. Well, Chris and I, are going to come out to your show. Shout out to Chris, who's always here doing audio visual. And next time you're in trouble, dude, we got to have you back on.
Yes.
Cool, man. Thanks for being on.
Sure. Thank you.